안녕하십니까. 유엔미래포럼의 한국대표 박영숙입니다. 오늘은 전 세계 60여 개 대표단을 두고 있는 미래예측기구 밀레니엄 프로젝트 회장님을 모시겠습니다. 제롬글렌 박사님 올라오시기 바랍니다.
We all know that a lot of change is happening around the world today. And it doesn't matter whether you're a theist, an atheist, a Canadian or an American, or a German or a French or Chinese. We all know that change is going on in a more rapid pace. Most recently, we know that artificial intelligence defeated a Go champion. And that is just the beginning. You know, if you go to the ocean, you sit there or you stand there and you can feel the current around your ankles, so you know something is going on. But if you just look down, you won't see that wave coming at you. And that wave is about artificial intelligence and a lot of other things, but artificial intelligence is a center part of it. The program that beat the Go champion and the program that beat the chess champion and the program that beat the Jeopardy contestants, those programs were written by human beings to intelligently do things that we by ourselves as champions didn't do, but they were still programs that did not rewrite their own code. So when an artificial intelligence can be connected to the Internet of Things, ubiquitous computing around the entire world with sensor networks, then it can learn from feedback worldwide to rewrite its own code, which means it learns second by second by second on a global basis. Now, we're not sure when that's going to happen. Futurists do not know the truth of the future, but we know more about the possibilities than people who don't study the future. So I'm not going to give you a specific date, but I'm willing to take a bet. By 2030, this stuff will begin to happen. And when that begins to happen, the amount of change that we have seen in Korea over the last 25 years will look slow compared to the next 25 years. Because Moore's Law made a lot of that change in the last 25 years. This is where computer capabilities doubled and the price went down and everything moved and moved and moved and moved, right? But that was when it didn't do its own coding. When we start to do writing its own code into artificial general intelligence, then that will make Moore's Law look slow. The next thing that's going to speed up the acceleration of change is computational science. Computational science is where you do a simulation of reality, and you can have people dedicate part of their computers around the world to collaborate on correlative studies and matching of different molecules for cancer research or other kinds of things, so that you can literally create 1 million computers around the world that dedicate some of their time to collaborate on scientific research. That's making a supercomputer capability on the fly for no money. That has been done for the SETI at home, the extraterrestrial information that they're matching up with NASA. It's been done for cancer, and it will be done increasingly, so that any problem you can define specifically and that you can match that up in some sort of large databases in the cloud can be done and be created for supercomputer capability on physics, biology, chemistry, engineering, which will accelerate science much faster, because in the past you had to have a laboratory, do experiments, do the tests, publish results, get the feedback. You're looking at years. Here you're looking at days. Now, you may have noticed in newspaper articles about nuclear bomb testing, not like North Korea, but when the U.S. does nuclear bomb testing, they don't actually drop a bomb and test it. It is done in computational physics. It's a simulation. That's how they're doing it. And this has been going on for years. It just hasn't gotten out to the public, where an individual acting alone can define a problem, announce to the internet, everybody that wants to play, download this software and we'll create a supercomputer to solve the problem. That is possible coming up. So when you take Moore's law, artificial intelligence going into reprogramming itself into artificial general intelligence, and you take computational science, imagine taking those three and juggling them and figuring out the future. So this means what we think is possible and impossible should change. When I was a bit younger, and somebody'd say, well, you'll just ask a question to some massive computer system, it'll give you the answer. We thought that was science fiction nonsense. Now we do it every day at no cost worldwide. So here's another thing that will sound very far out today, but is a straight trend forecast. We all should be able to become augmented geniuses. Just like you augment your eyesight with your glasses. You're not born with perfect vision, but you augment it, and you're okay. We're not all born geniuses, so we can augment that and become geniuses. Today, the United States is trying to reverse engineer the brain to figure out how the brain works. The European Union is doing the same thing. China is doing the same thing. That's going on right now. Also, IBM, Watson's program, will have a Watson 2.0, a Watson 3.0. They'll call it something different, but you get the idea. It's going to keep on going. And Google wants to do an artificial brain companion for you. All 4 or 5 of these projects are going to start spying on each other, and I hope they do, so that we'll eventually be able to figure out how do we make the human brain act as if it were genius. Just like with glasses, you act as if you have perfect vision. Now, Korea has an opportunity to take leadership on this. No country, to my knowledge, has increasing intelligence as an objective of education. They have increasing knowledge and make you good citizens, but not making this a genius, increasing intelligence. If you declared increasing intelligence as an objective of education, what will happen? People are going to have to look at all these projects. They're going to have to compare the notes. They're going to have teacher training programs. All of a sudden, you become a magnet for research around the world. No country, to my knowledge, has taken that step. Now, 3 kinds of artificial intelligence. People will have different ways of organizing it. Here's the way I organize it. Artificial narrow intelligence is the Watson, the Siri, the focus. You're focusing into a narrow job. And it's doing better than we can on that narrow job. But nevertheless, it's a focused, narrow intelligence. Artificial general intelligence is like you. You don't change your brain when you work on a new problem because you have a general intelligence. When we can reprogram artificial intelligence to reprogram itself and grow just like you take in information and you improve your intelligence all the time, when we can do that, that's artificial general intelligence. Then after that is artificial superintelligence. That's when it's beyond our understanding. That's when it's setting its own goals, its own capabilities, and maybe beyond our understanding. So one of the things that we have to engage as a human species is begin to think together, what do we really want to create? In the past, we were confined by a lot of restrictions. Those restrictions are going away. It is now reasonable for humanity to think together about what is really possible and recreating what is possible on an ongoing basis. In the past, we tended to look at the future in very narrow ways, like what's the future of artificial intelligence, or what's the future of synthetic biology, or what's the future of nanotechnology, or what's the future of politics, or what's the future of religion. And we looked at these things as separate items. Now in technology, we find that that's not what's the best way to do it. What's the best way to do it is to look at the integration, the synergies, combinations of technologies. If we were to do a forecast of the telephone 30 years ago, we wouldn't have said a flashlight. If we did a forecast of an alarm clock 30 years ago, we wouldn't have said a telephone. If we did a forecast of a telephone, we wouldn't have said a video camera for internet. But what do we have now? We have a smartphone that does all of these things, and far more than we can even understand because you've got access to all these apps, for God's sake. So we have no idea what the capability of our telephone is today. So it's this integration of technology we have to think of, the integrations of politics we have to think about. It's the integration of the human species that we have to think about because that is what is happening in the world. So here's a better way of looking at the future of technology. You know that a Rubik's Cube, you can move it around and try to make new combinations. So imagine giving children toys like this in a 3D environment, a hyperspace environment, where you're actually mixing and matching different kinds of technologies and saying to students, well, how could artificial intelligence change nanotechnology? How could nanotechnology affect synthetic biology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Because these are the combinations. This is where creativity will come from. Wealth is made by putting new combinations of value to people. How do you find those new combinations? The Rubik's Cube is one approach. Here's another approach where you're braiding things together. Now, you can also look at it on a larger scale as well. Think of biology and technology. How does that integrate? You can think about artificial intelligence and the built environment. How does that integrate? How do those four together overlap? That's going to give you good characterizations of what the future might be like. Now, one of the things that's being experimented on, and I believe here in Korea as well, in other countries as well, is the idea of the old contact lens. All that did is it gave you, a better way to see at a distance. Well, what happens if that contact lens has internet access? What happens if it has voice recognition and synthesis? What happens if it can diagnose parts of your body and so forth? Imagine mentally living in more than one reality at a time. So as you're giving keywords, up comes in your virtual space that you're looking through the contact lens, you're seeing different realities, just like you have augmented realities. You take your smartphone and you can see restaurants in a certain area and so forth, but that's just one. But then imagine you have other kinds of things. So imagine in another generation or two looking back at yourself, your grandchildren looking back at you and saying, Mommy and Granddaddy, did you actually live in one reality at a time? How boring. Your brain has got the ability to do all kinds of things. We talk about it only using 10%. Well, let's get it on. With this little device, you might be able to live in many realities simultaneously and get used to it. Now, futurists have think tricks to help them put all this vast amount of information together in some sort of coherent way so you don't go nuts. One of the think tricks is a cross-impact matrix here. So the idea here is you could list, for example, some technologies down one side and list the same ones across the top. But they could be anything. They could be new ideas or whatever. So you say, well, how can the things on this side impact on the other ones? This is how you find out what new combinations of politics, of government, of environment, or in this case, technology, how they can fit together. I guarantee you that if someone actually listed these future technologies down on one side and repeated them across the top and said, how can nanotechnology change synthetic biology? How could nanotechnology change artificial intelligence, et cetera? And you went through the whole and try to answer every single little box. I guarantee you will have ideas in your mind that you have never had them before. The elements of them were in your brain all the time because you're getting all this information. All this does is help you get more intelligent about the combinations. So where's all this going? Many futurists have different views. I'll share you mine. After 40 years of experience in futures research, I think that what's really happening is we're offloading our consciousness, behaviorally speaking, offloading our consciousness into the physical environment, and we're taking all kinds of futuristic technology and integrating it on our bodies and in our bodies. So we will become cyborgs, not the crazy science fiction cyborgs. After all, part of the job of science fiction is to warn us about what we don't want to do. So what we're going to integrate, just like eyeglasses is early, you're early cyborgs with the glasses, right? All the astronauts, the cosmonauts, and submariners, you're dependent upon technology for a vital function. Increasingly, that is happening. It's measurable. There's no question about it. And I see nothing slowing that down. At the same time, we're going to be putting sensors in the Internet of Things is one of the early ideas of this. The whole physical environment seems to become sentient. Just like we talked about the idea of all of nature being alive, rivers being alive, all of the stars being alive, everything being alive. Well, the built environment that we do make it also be like that. So it will be able to talk to us talk to it, and to make us a continuum between our physical environment and our conscious environment, to make a conscious technology continuum of humanity. Now, there's no guarantee that such a conscious technology future will be good. Just like the Industrial Revolution had some good stuff and had some bad stuff. I think that one of the ways we make the conscious technology future good is how well the mystic and the technocrat in ourselves and in our society can get along. Because if we're going to have consciousness and technology interacting, the masters of consciousness are the mystics, the masters of technology are the technocrats. Right now, there's prejudice between the two. Each one thinks they're superior to the other. But if we can create some sort of harmony, some sort of yin-yang or relationship with them, then I think how well we do that will determine how well the conscious technology future. And so the viewers and participants in this program here are a part of this job, because consciousness is going to have to be related with technology in new ways that has not in the past for this civilization to be good. Now, futurists like to put things in little boxes sometimes, so here's some of my little boxes about that. In the agricultural age, the product was resources and food. The power, religion was a controlling factor. Wealth was made by land. The activity was on the earth. War was fought over locations. That's why we had castles and all that sort of stuff. And time was a cycle, because that's what it was. You planted when you reaped. Everything, there's nothing new under the sun, because there wasn't anything new under the sun. Cycle. As we move down more into the present tense, the information age, power moves to the corporation. That's why you've got an argument between Google and some countries in Asia at the moment. You may remember the transition between religion and nation state was Napoleon. Remember that there's a famous painting of Napoleon taking the crown out of the hand of the religious leader and sticking it on his own head. Now, each part of the past doesn't disappear. You're just building new things on top of it. Religion is still an organizing principle of humanity. Nation state invented power beyond that. Corporations are inventing power beyond that. And then eventually, the individual will be more powerful than all of that, because the individual will have all the access to all of that and can move across all the different areas, whereas the others are more stationary, not able to move as much. So this is something that you can look at later on. I put all this into a book back in the 80s. I'm showing you this simply because I've thought about this for a while. And here's a book back in the 80s, and it still holds up to a large degree pretty well. But where the weak point, though, is between the mystic and the technocrat. Most people understand of conscious technology in the technological, biological sense, but not about the ethics involved between the mystic and the technocrat creating a better future. One of the things that's coming up now is that, and this is important stuff, because we will be able to do brain-mediated computer-to-brain communication. This has already occurred. This is where one student was in a room and was seeing a screen that was, and it was attached, his brain was attached to electrodes that went to another student in another room. The second student, if you'll take a look at this picture here, you'll see that the second student has got his finger on a mouse. When the first student playing the game thinks about firing or doing something in the program, watching the program, the second student's finger twitches and moves on the mouse. That's action at a distance. From brain, no words, to brain. All right? Military has interest in this sort of thing, because you can program people in conflict situations, right? So if we can do all the stuff that I just mentioned, plus brain-to-brain communication, the great oneness of humanity looks like it's possible, but we've got to make sure that great oneness is going to be good. And that's not clear. So we've got to think about how consciousness and technology continually goes back and forth and balances each other. Where does this leave us? My guess is that, yes, we want to have technology and consciousness in a harmony. Yes, artificial intelligence may go beyond our understanding if we don't do something about it. So why not, if you can't beat them, so to speak, join them? My guess is the faster we look at how to integrate artificial intelligence and the rest of these new forms of technologies, integrate them with us so that we evolve together. I gave you one example of evolving together with augmented genius. There's other kinds of ways we can evolve together as well. And we as a species are going to have to talk about this around the world, because this is going to affect everybody. This leads us to the inevitability of a new economics. We know that wealth is being concentrated and continually concentrated. Anybody know how to stop that at the moment? There's ideas, but not much is being done yet. The income gaps are getting wider between countries and within countries. We know that employmentless economic growth seems to be the new norm. You can see the economic growth going up, but the employment not doing as well. Return on investment now is much higher in financial instruments and in technology than in training human beings. Future technologies can replace much of the human labor. So long-term structural unemployment is a business-as-usual, surprise-free forecast. Now, we can't have a world where like half the world is out in the streets. It's not a possible future, right? We don't want that. So we have to begin to think about how we're going to think together about this. We have done the Millennium Project, the think tank that I run, the Millennium Project has done a literature search on all the ideas as much as we're able to read and put them together to find out what questions haven't been asked or haven't been answered well. We put that into a Delphi, which is a questionnaire of different futurists around the world. We took the responses from those questionnaires, created draft scenarios, then sent the scenarios out for more critical review. And we're now in the process of making those scenarios finalized, and we'll be giving them to Dr. Park Young-suk and others around the world in the Millennium Project to invite people in their country to have workshops to begin to think this through. When they come up with their suggestions and ideas and strategies, then we want to bring those into one integrated package and then give them back to every country so that we would initiate a rational, intelligent conversation about how we can make this economic transition without the difficulties of previous transitions. So the three scenarios, the first one is it's complicated, a mixed bag. That's basically projecting all those interactions of technology, all that sort of stuff I talked about, sort of projecting it out into 2050. What's it like? How did we get there? So there's both good and there's bad. It's a mixed bag, sort of like the present tense, except more so out into the future. The next one is we don't make these intelligent forecasts. We don't listen to the futurists. We ignore making serious decisions. Political gridlock continues, and we have a mess. The third scenario is if humans were free, self-actualizing economy. The idea of humans are free, when I was a bit younger, I might write a proposal, and if the proposal was turned down, I wouldn't do the project. But what if I was free? I wrote a proposal and just started doing it. Now, why don't I do that in the past? Well, because I figure that self-worth, self-value is defined by your work, and your work was defined by somebody else saying it was okay. Right? That's basically how it works. So, but if we had an increasing amount of wealth being produced by these new technologies, and if enough of that can also then be returned to people who are being unemployed, then you don't have to work to make a living. You'll still have enough money so that you can actually eat and shelter yourself and lean back and think, well, what should I do? I'm a unique human being. When I work in a job somewhere, that not all of me is used. So if I was able to self-actualize myself, how do I want to be? And if I was given that freedom, that time to think about it, I might find markets for my activities around the whole world, not just in my neighborhood. So the purpose of work could be self-actualization rather than earning a living if we're able to make this transition. But we don't know if that's going to happen. But that's what that scenario is about. So one approach to trying to keep track of all this stuff is called collective intelligence. It's hard for each one of us to keep track of all this information. But we know that all that information is all in the brains of all these human beings all around the world. So how do we organize all that stuff? We call it collective intelligence. So collective intelligence is a system with three parts. The human brain's information and the hardware, how these three can interrelate and change each other. A relational database does not change your email. Your email does not change your spreadsheet and so forth. They're separate systems. What we need, the next step in the evolution of information technology, is collective intelligence. And we put together a collective intelligence system on these future ideas called the Global Futures Intelligence System. And you can access this one by the address themp.org and see how that goes. And then people around the world, we hope, will engage in that so we have an organized platform for the growth of our collective intelligence together as a species, because these things all affect all of us. It's no longer just nation states. And then we also stick it in the State of the Future book each couple of years. And I thank you for your attention. And I do hope a great future for Korea.
Thank you for your lecture. All the internet systems and networking, and we need that electricity is right, but we have to think about some damage from the universe, like solar energy and something like that. What do you think about the impacts of that? Some kind of the shocks from the universe that into the internet system or electricity system and networking system in the future.
Well, actually, there is some research that just came out last year that has not been verified yet. But it's important for humanity to know about this. If for those of you who know, the magnetic poles of the Earth, every so often they switch, right? And before they switch, the strength of the magnetic poles goes down a little bit, and then they switch. The magnetic strength of the poles are going down right now. So people will go, well, okay, no problem, because it switched before, and somehow vegetation and so forth have continued on. But the research that I'm referring to is different. It went at the strengths throughout history, the long view of history. And it found that there's a slow decrease in the magnetic strength overall of the poles, not just simply the switching, but it's going down a little bit all the time, which stands to reason because nature says entropy, things do run down. There may be synergy of consciousness, but there's at least entropy in the physical energy world. If that's the case, the person ran the model and forecasted that by 500 years, the magnetic, for those of you who don't know, the magnetic poles has this magnetic bubble around us that protects us. So the sunshine hits us and goes mostly around us. Just a little bit comes in. If enough more came in, we'd be dead. So we need this magnetic container. But the strength of that container, it seems, going down. We're going to do more research, and if it turns out that that is the case, that 500 years we may be toast, we have a choice of living underground, living in the ocean, or maybe space migration. My own preference is space migration. Life goes to where it's not. We went from the oceans to the land, and now we go in the air and then in space. So it makes sense. And there is a philosopher who made the point that as a human zygote in the body does not know what it is when it grows up, and when it comes out and gets born, it's 100% dependent upon the parents, the mother first and also the parents. 100% dependent, just like we're 100% dependent on the sun. 100% dependent. So the analogy is that humanity may not know what it really is until it grows up beyond the solar system, in the same way that the zygote doesn't know what it is until it gets born and grows up beyond the parents.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
I think that we already have too many, the overpopulation problem in the small Earth. And do you think actually the future technology can solve all the problems related with a population?
Right.
It can be possible?
Yeah. Population and resources is a relationship that can change if human behavior changes. If we make all of our energy from coal, that's a different...
Oil.
Yeah, if we do that, that's one kind of future. If we did it from geothermal energy, from solar, from wind, and all these renewables, that's another future. So it's not just simply, it's not an absolute number saying there can only be so many people on the earth for nature to support it. Nature's not supporting it, at least in the sense of renewing nature. Now, we're already using more of nature than nature is replenishing. So we're already, as your question I assume is pointing out, already in trouble. Now, can we act quite differently in the future to have much fewer resources and much smaller environmental impacts? Absolutely. However, you also know in Korea that your fertility rate is going down. Russia's going down. Japan's going down. Italy's going down. And even in high fertility rate areas like Kenya, its rate is beginning to go down too. So it is quite possible that we're at the beginning to be a bell curve. All right? Now, that doesn't mean we're safe. But some things, since you ask about how can technology play in this, here's an example. There's two kinds of nanotechnology. One is you make a big machine to make little things. That's what we have today. The other doesn't exist yet. It's where you make little things that make bigger things that make bigger things and they build up. That's the nanotechnology promise of the future.
So like a magic?
No, this is not magic. Yeah. You can look up nanotechnology. Eric Drexler, he coined the term nanotechnology, actually. But the idea is that you can have molecular assemblers where you, when we manufacture something like a TV camera, it's like taking buckets of molecules and pouring them into buckets of other molecules. It's very crude, very crude. What happens if we're able to manufacture molecule by molecule in relationship to other molecule? You don't create pollution that way. Pollution is a resource out of place. In other words, if you take cow manure and you put it in compost, it's not pollution. You put cow manure in your drinking water, it's pollution. The relationship is what matters. As we get more precise, molecularly precise manufacturing, pollution goes away, efficiency goes up, long-term, but that's just one of the technologies. So yeah, we can live far more environmentally intelligent than we are. We know a lot about how to do that, but we're not making the decisions quickly to do it. We've known since Thomas Edison that coal was a problem. We've known this for a long time. We're still building coal plants.
Are you talking about the free energy system? It's like a 0-point energy, something like that?
There's some progress on that. I got to admit it. There's some progress on that. But so far, we don't know if it'll ever be able to be scaled up. It may be. I don't know. But yes, there is some progress on this area, and there's some possibilities. But in the meantime, I'd rather do what we can do with renewable energy, because I don't know how long it's going to take to scale up that capability. You know, it's like my first email was 1973. People didn't start using email until I think 1990s. The internet protocol was in the late 60s, right? So there's tremendous gaps of time, unfortunately. So you may be right, that may occur, but it may be a bunch of years. In the meantime, we got to behave ourselves better now.
Okay, hi, my name is Stuart Smallwood, and I work as a translator here for the Jungsendo Research Institute. And my question is about maintaining the value of the individual as we become more integrated with technology. Now, the obvious trend that you spoke, and the overriding theme that you spoke about was integration of technology, integration of ideas. Not just networking, but almost the sense that technology, robotics, all of these things, not only in a networking sense, but almost in a physical sense, are going to be integrated to the point where perhaps there's not even any way that we can uniquely define them. They will be almost one and the same singularity, you might say. So as we become more, as you said, if we can't beat it, we must join it. So as we become more integrated in this, how can we maintain individual value or even individual autonomy?
Good.
You spoke of number 3, which was the self-actualizing economy. How is there even going to be an individual or individuals if we integrate into this network? And how is that more efficient than perhaps, us becoming drones for a overriding purpose, and so on and so forth?
Right.
Would it be some kind of religious individualism, or is there some kind of overriding technological firewall that maintains human autonomy and unique consciousness?
Right. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, one of the jobs, aside from entertaining us, science fiction, is also to give us some warnings. And there's a very good warning about what you described. It's the Borgs in Star Trek. It's a very good example of like wiping out the individual. I personally don't think that is likely, and I'll tell you why. Consider the different search questions each one of you have done in the last 24 hours. I'll bet you that diversity is quite a lot. I'll bet you if it was 5 years ago, the diversity was slightly less. And because of the different mechanisms we'll have, even the choice of mechanisms we'll have will be quite different as well. So although like for example, I am in a sense integrated in the internet by my emails and websites and collective intelligence and all that sort of stuff. But how I use the system is different than how you do it. If we were all farmers many years ago, the diversity of the individual wasn't that much. People would argue, well, yeah, but look at airports. They're all the same. Isn't it making us all the same? I'm saying, but look at the diversity of the consciousness going through those airports. So I think, I think that the reverse is actually more likely, is because you are hopefully free to choose this, like in a menu. Imagine you go to a big bunch of food. There's a lot of food there. There's all the same choices, but there's too many choices for one person to do it all. So your selectivity may be, your individuality and your individual consciousness and development may be even more yourself than copying. If we're all working in a financial investment house, you know, cranking away the numbers the same way, that's one. But if I'm actually able to have part of my time in financial investment, part of my time in teaching people juggling, part of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, am I more me as a result of that? I think so. But I want everybody to think about that question all the time. Some things we have to work on all the time. It's like cyber espionage, cyber war, information war. I don't see an actual end to it, but I see that we have to be vigilant about it. It's an intellectual arms race all the time. So the idea of protecting our souls, so to speak, we have to do all the time. But I think that we'll win that.
To kind of branch off from that a little bit, it's the same idea. But as we integrate into certain networks, in the same way that as our finances become integrated into networks and so on, we become more susceptible to external influence and breaches from either bad actors or even the government, as we see surveillance increasing and so on.
Right.
So not even surveillance. So how do we protect ourselves from, you know, further surveillance, but also how do we protect ourselves from actual physical manipulation of the way that we think? We already see manipulation in the sense of public relations, mass marketing, and so on and so forth, which is the attempt to change the way that we think. But as we are actually physically integrated or, you know, mentally integrated into these networks, that's, I guess, the biggest fear that I would have would be that you actually have these external forces that are changing the way that you think, breaching your consciousness.
Yes, and I agree. It is terrifying to me to see relatively quasi-alert people still saying climate change is not real. I mean, I first wrote about climate change in 1973. So I've watched the conversation personally for a long time. And the very idea that people have such nonsense in their minds is quite frightening. Yes, the ability to manipulate the human being is going up, not going down. So the ability to think on our own, to learn things like philosophy and logic and reasoning and meditation and all kinds of these other individual things ought to be reinforced a lot. I don't see a guarantee that people will be wise enough not to allow themselves to be brainwashed. But people do get brainwashed. That's sort of the object of advanced marketing. So if you take organized crime, which is twice the income per year than all the military budgets in the world combined. Let me repeat that. Take the military budget of South Korea and North Korea and China and the United States and Russia, you add them up, it's around 1.5 or so trillion, trillion dollars. Organized crime, by our estimate, is over 3 trillion. They're also in this manipulation game also as well, and will be more so. Advertising is also in that same game. Governments are involved in this sort of stuff as well. So the mixing of all these forces manipulating individuals' thought is going to be increasing more than decreasing. So we have to be really, really vigilant about that. And I can see a lot of things to that. One is our education system has got to teach us how to think, not simply how to behave. Two, we're going to have to get smart about creating our own avatars. I didn't talk about that much in this one, but just like Facebook is like a very elementary thing that allows you to put your values and your interests and so forth in it and your networks and so it's very elementary. Imagine this, you know the movie Avatar? Yeah. Okay, so imagine an avatar up into the future where it's not a physical running around, but an electronic avatar that has, you've been teaching it over the years who you are, what you want to do, so that it becomes your defense mechanism out there. And it's learning from it and rewriting its code, you know, because as it gets manipulated, it responds back, and so forth. So things like this, I think, should be taught in schools now. You know, it's like we had this virgin brain as a kid growing up, and if people put junk in it, what do you expect? And we're going to be living in a junky, noisy environment, more and more so. So how we sort through all that sort of stuff, that's where some of this AI stuff, if all goes well, can help us. I think we have a fabulous future ahead of us if we actually look at what the possibilities are rather than burying our heads in the sand and not take a look at the big challenges we have. Those challenges can be bad for us and they can be good for us. It all depends on what we do.
여러분은 장시간 제롬글렌 박사의 인공지능과 의식기술 시대의 사회 변화, 다양한 문제점을 우리가 어떻게 해결할 것인가, 2050 이제 일자리 문제는 어떻게 변화가 다가오는가에 대해서 말씀을 들으셨습니다.